Welcome. Let's get started with our discussion on a no-brainer approach to professional development. I'll get started with asking you guys a couple of questions. Type your answers in the chat box, just yes or no. How many of you believe that a job well done speaks for itself, it's enough? How many of you have ever been in a meeting where someone paraphrased your idea and got the credit for it and even got applause? And finally, who amongst us is deathly terrified of the networking portions of any conference? Okay, so I'm not alone. In this talk, I'm going to offer some reasons behind challenges such as the ones above and make some remedial suggestions based on research and studies rooted in neuroscience and psychology. I want you to hang on to the answer to the first question in particular, because we are going to go into detail with that. Specifically today, we are going to explore the value of three components of professional development as I see them: networking, building a personal brand, and managing stress. Before we do that, I want us to sign a hypothetical contract. I will make several suggestions whilst I'm speaking here today, and I want you to commit to just one. If you agree, type yes. That's going to be our contract, and we are going to work on it together. And I'll come to sharing the details later on. So when people get asked, where's home? Usually there is a straightforward answer, but not me. I was born and grew up in India and moved to the UK to study neuroscience at Oxford. And I later worked in academia before pivoting into management consulting, as you do. After living and working in London for a few years, I moved to Switzerland because the mountains, cheese, and Swiss banks were calling onto me. It was a comfortable life when one morning I wake up and feel this sudden surge of imposter syndrome. I asked myself, what kind of management consultant could I be if I don't have a business degree? Because from the list of all of the degrees that I have hoarded, you can see that I've been a psychologist and a scientist all my life. To overcome this, I came to Stanford Business School for my management degree. I currently live and work in San Francisco as a management consultant. Why is this background important? I believe that apart from all of the formal education I've had, there is an invaluable, priceless perspective that you get from living and working in 4 different countries with wildly varying cultures. And I'm looking to bring some of that to this talk too. When I'm not working, I love fencing and writing. I used to be a journalist for the Times of India. I've written op-eds for the Wall Street Journal and a bunch of other newspapers. I covered art and life desk at the Stanford newspapers. Most recently, I also wrote a case study with Professor Jennifer Acker at the Stanford Business School on the role of humor in business. And this forms part of the MBA curriculum. Oh, I see people have coming from a bunch of places. Wow, that's a longer list than I have. Amazing. Let's get started with our first component that we are going to discuss, networking. Networking and our near universal terror of it kind of intrigues me. So before we get started about how to combat it, let's talk about first where the discomfort actually comes from, then offer ways to overcome this fear. Speaking about discomfort, a cool psychologist from Toronto ran this experiment with 2 groups of students and professionals. They were asked to put themselves and think about 2 detailed scenarios in first person. One involved them being in a professional networking situation where they were looking to progress their career, look for a job, etc. And the second one was purely to make friends, forge a personal connection. After this imagination was done, the participants were given a list of incomplete words to complete with some neutral words and some cleaning product related words. So for example, you'd be given S-P and you could complete it as stop or soap. Overwhelmingly, the people in the first group, i.e. the professional networking group, picked cleaning products to complete these words. So much so that picked Lysol and Windex over things like Snickers and ice cream. But where does that come from? So this basically indicated that somehow dirt was on their mind. And the reasoning behind this is that whenever we view our actions as being at any level selfish, transactional, or morally questionable, we literally feel unclean. I just found that fascinating because a little part of me dies when I network as well. So I'm desperately trying to reframe it in my head too. So what do we do about this? Let me offer you 2 reframes to help take the sting out. And the first would be navigational assistance. Now, if I were to ask you to speak to the person next to you and just ask them directions to the nearest burrito place, you're not going to find that too hard to do. It's just going from point A to B. Networking is not too dissimilar. You're basically trying to get to know a person, especially if you're looking to get into that field, and track that route. Second being sincere curiosity. This would be a genuine desire to know a person. And the operational word here is sincere, because our brains, being powerful as they are very quick to read into the tiniest of facial muscles, eye movement cues, and be able to tell if the interaction was genuine and sincere or not. We've discussed the discomfort. We've discussed some ways to combat it, reframe it in our head. Next question is, why should we bother? Like, why is networking important? Why do it at all? And neuroscience researchers at Wharton found that people who form deeper connections with each other, not only at workplace, but outside, tend to live longer, happier, and healthier lives. It's just a wellness imperative almost. And it makes sense that people who have mastered the skill off and on the clock will generally do better in life and the workplace. Now, two quick things. I am still trying to make up my mind if I'm an ambivert or a total extrovert, but the strategies for introverts. Let me give you a comforting statement. Adults in business meetings tend to not laugh at people. So no matter how your networking connection attempt went, if it didn't go well, you're probably just never going to see that person again, and no harm done. The second is hidden opportunities to be mined that are outside of conferences like this and networking events, etc. These could be interviews, whether or not you got the job. If you got the job, join the workplace and maybe reach out to the person who interviewed you and thank them, have coffee with them. Maybe they were from a different team that you might be interested in working with another time. And if you didn't get the job, still offer to remain connected on LinkedIn. Then cultivate these relationships. So we've talked about networking, where the discomfort comes from and what to do about it. Let's move on to the most important component as I think about it, which is when we are in the workplace. It's the importance of building a personal brand. And there are several ways to go about doing that. The first is this idea of bringing your whole self to work. And when I say whole, I don't mean like turn up to work in your Burning Man costume. Mainly trying to imply bring the two components of your identity, warmth and competence. Warmth refers to in psychological literature as how you relate to people, how you make them feel. And competence is simply, can you get the job done? Bring both. And owning up to your own messes and vulnerabilities sometimes can be really powerful and almost endearing. There's this concept in psychology called the pratfall effect. There was a research conducted where people were asked to judge their perception of two individuals. One was a superior, above average, competent person, and another one was just average. And then the condition was manipulated where both of them spilled coffee on themselves, and they were rated again. Shockingly, the likability of the already above average person increased even more, and the likability of the average person decreased. One thing to remember about this concept is it only works if you've already seen as someone competent. Also, the vulnerabilities that you're owning up to, it's best probably if they don't relate to your core competence. BFFs at work. A vast body of research has found that on-the-job friendships are great for both us and the organization that we are working with. It results in lower churn at the job, greater job satisfaction, better communication, well-being, even creativity and innovation. But remember, there needs to be a balance between people you want to socialize with and people that you need to. For example, you might be a techie wanting to break into product management. So it might make sense for you to reach out to this person for a quick lunch or coffee date. Popularity at work. I find this amusing because it's just such a complex concept in organizational behavior. Popularity, the dictionary defines it as twofold, being accepted and being widely known. And think about this alongside the idea and importance of establishing and using power, and then being likable using things like humor. One is related to status and another is just pure likability. So who do you want to be? It'll depend on the outcomes that you're seeking. Speaking of power, remember at the start of the session, I asked you a question about if you think the job well done is enough and you don't need to do anything else. And tough to break it to you, but it's really not. While intelligence and hard work really go a long way in determining your success on the job, there are other skills that we might not really be comfortable in even acknowledging that have a far greater impact on your success in the workplace. And these would be things like self-promotion, knack for building relationships, political abilities, cultivating a reputation for authority, and perfecting a powerful demeanor. There needs to be a balance, again, as with most things in life. It depends on the outcomes you want. So there is an idea of playing high and low, which is popularized by one of my favorite psychologists at Stanford, Dr. Deborah Grunfeld. And she talks about tactics that you can use to play high, which is suitable to apply in situations where you want to assert dominance and authority. And these would include things like holding long, intense eye contact, interrupting people to ask a question before you even know what to ask. It feels super sneaky. And then playing low, which would be just the opposite. So avoiding eye contact or darting eye movements rapidly, not taking up too much physical or even cognitive space. And both can be used very effectively depending on the situation you're in. So playing low, for example, could be very important in situations that demand you to build a rapport, establish likability, especially when you're in a situation with a high status person. So there you don't want to be, an alpha person asserting dominance. And there would be other situations that do require you to play high. I found that agility, an important concept to remember when you're exercising power. The last bit here is humor. And people don't generally equate humor with business, but researchers found that leaders with a sense of humor, and it didn't have to be good or bad sense of humor, any sense of humor, was enough to guarantee that they were 27% more motivating leaders for their teams. Their employees were more engaged. Teams were twice as creative as well. A couple of tactical ways to achieve this. One would be emails. Modern day workplace, we spend almost 30% of our time writing and answering emails. If you were to ask my 5-year-old nephew, he'd probably say 100% of the time I'm just looking at emails. Trying to inject some levity in there could be very effective and might be welcome by your audience as well. And it could be achieved by things like have an inside joke, get rid of boring phrases like hope you're well, maybe cultivate a practice of putting PS, like just one-liner funny things, but be authentic, like don't force it. Goodbyes. Now, this is an interesting one. How you say goodbye when you leave a job really matters. And there is a psychological heuristic called the peak end rule. And what it says is people judge the quality of our interaction with a person based on the intensity of the interaction that we had, the emotional intensity of the interaction that we had, and its end, how the interaction ended, rather than the sum average of the whole interaction. So suddenly the last bit, the goodbye, becomes really important. I think you'd be missing a trick if you were to just say, hey, I'm off, connect with me in LinkedIn, blah. Let's just opportunity miss. These have been our ways to talk about building a brand. And it's extremely important to be known for something. So for example, I am known for being thrust into situations when the project needs to be delivered extremely quickly and the environment is very messy and chaotic. So speed is my calling card, and also my hair. I think what drew you guys probably to the talk, managing stress. And I love the picture we've got here, because a lot of us are in that habit of just like the world around us is burning down, but we keep going and say, it's fine. We're not going to take a sick day. Let's keep going. A model that personally appeals to me comes from a field called mind-body medicine, which is a holistic and integrative approach to wellness. We don't need to review the endless literature about the harms that stress does to our body. Like it literally shrinks the structural components of our brain, reduces gray matter. But not only does it do that, it also can affect our cognition, social skills, and connections. MIT neuroscientists ran some experiments where they found that when you're exposed to extremely stressful situations, people made risky decisions, especially where the situations actually needed a very well thought out cost-benefit analysis, and they skipped it altogether. Experiments were run with mice where in highly stressful situations, they chose high rewards, but the high rewards chosen came with disproportionately high levels of risk as well. Stress has its cost. The burn framework that I present here offers behavioral techniques to build this resilience and our internal capacity to combat stress. Behavioral techniques, just connecting with your family, have some hobbies outside of work, volunteer work, exercise, move, just move. Relaxation, again, several routes to achieving this. Could be meditation, good quality sleep, etc. And then, of course, nutrition. Just give your brain some premium food. In this section, let's talk about burnout and noise. Because this is something that we really need to change our lens with, because we have somehow glorified multitasking. And scientific study of multitasking over the past few years has revealed the really important things about our processing limitations of our brain when it comes to working on several tasks in parallel. One critical finding to emerge is we typically ourselves inflate our ability to multitask. We just like, oh, that's fine. We can do 3 things at one go. But the human brain lacks the actual architectural design to be able to do this, to perform 2 or more tasks concurrently. And this is because the way our brain is built, the building blocks of executive control and attention, it cannot do that. It just cannot. So when we attempt to multitask, what happens is you just perform very quick shifts between one task and another. And when you do these shifts, it comes together with a drop in performance, what's called switching costs. So really think hard before taking on wildly different sets of tasks. The business world probably would not function if we just worked linearly, but this is something to be mindful of. Now, given I'm a consultant, I'm going to offer you a detailed implementation roadmap. Suggested schedule of activities would be first, just assess where you are, assess status quo, like maybe you're already doing these things really well. And where there are gaps, develop intervention techniques to improve on those. Second would be aim for tiny wins. You're not going to be a pro networker overnight, but maybe commit to attending one conference a month or a networking event a month. The brain structures and studies around social conformity and cooperation tell us that having an accountability buddy really works wonders. So just having an accountability buddy works wonders, where just the thought of having to report to your buddy on your progress results in better outcomes than you would have otherwise had. And then promoting your expertise. Remember the contract that we signed initially. This is it. Please, at the end of this talk, at the end of the conference, when you're home and comfortable, please aim to get either one LinkedIn, Medium, TikTok, whatever appeals to you. Take your pick and talk about your expertise and your interests. You've done a good job, ask for testimonials and recommendations. You may have done a job very well and you're probably glowing in the satisfaction that the job was well done and you need nothing else. But go ahead and ask for that recommendation. Put it on LinkedIn. The world needs to know about your good work. Finally, check in on old bosses, colleagues, holiday friends. These connections really go a very long way into promoting happiness and connectedness, together making up mental resilience. So if you can't fix a broken workplace condition, like a Stoic philosopher, maybe let's do something to ourselves. So strengthen our own machinery to actually combat burnout and stress. Before I finish, 2 other highlights. So this is an implementation roadmap, but there's no end to it. The role lies. It's a continuous effort and iterative. Refine as you deem fit. Finally, what gets measured gets managed. Use tools to track yourself. Use sleep trackers, calendars, Excel spreadsheets, Chat GPT APIs integrated with your Notion boards, but use these tools and trackers to help you. You can choose to deep dive into any of these studies that I've talked about. Feel free to connect with me on any of the socials of your choice. And I would be more than happy to share the original journal articles and studies and give you some more recommendations and reading lists. Thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure speaking to everyone.